Welcome to the 18th common session of SunoikisisDC Digital Classics 2016. I have to apologize for the delay today, so we have to start a bit late, but we still have our common session. And today we have three guests, two from Leipzig, Chiara Palladino and Tariq Yousef, and then one from the University of Freiburg, Stelios Chronopoulos. They are working for the SunoikisIS community, so they are not new guests, but they are contributing again to our program. And today they are going to talk about lexicography and geography, so how to work with the TI and EpiDoc with specific applications to text concerning lexicography and geography. So welcome to our guests, and I think that Chiara Palladino is starting today. Welcome, Chiara.
Okay, so welcome everyone. I'm starting to share my screen now, so let me know if you can see the presentation. It should be starting.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes,
so can you all see the presentation? Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect. Welcome everyone, and we are going to talk about text and digital editing applied to use cases, essentially, which are our text of research, geography, and lexicography. Here you can find a very quick recap on the syllabus. We conceived this session as a kind of advanced introduction to TI and a way of highlighting essentially problems that are connected to creating digital editions of very peculiar texts. So a very quick recap about XML and digital editions. Why should we use digital editions or digital publications in general? That means that our text in machine-readable format. What is a text in machine-readable format? It is a text where the semantic features and some features of meaning are made explicit and are reusable, essentially. So it allows you the possibility of creating various output documents by transforming an XML document. You can have an HTML document, a PDF, a EPUB, or TXT document by simply transforming your XML document into something else. It allows various types of manipulation of the text, so you can have indexes, you can have tables of contents, you can have concordances, you can use it for text mining. You can obviously interchange the information that you have into the text with other projects, and you can also allow reuses that we at the moment cannot imagine. So the way you can create a digital edition or digital publication of a text is essentially applying a markup language to it. What is a markup language? In general, a markup language is a set of markers, or also named tags, that are used for an electronic text. And it essentially makes the text machine readable. It provides a functionality to some of its features that can be either semantic features or structural features. And the action of inserting those markers in the text is called markup or encoding, or less formally, let's say, tagging. Each markup language is also a validating schema in itself. It defines a set of rules that are associated with the markers in a given context, and it contains all the things, essentially all the elements or the attributes that can appear or may appear in a given context. It is also a markup vocabulary, which has a more, let's say, semantic function. It defines the functions of the markers that are employed with, to mark up specific features in a given schema. So what is XML? XML, extensible markup language. It is a type of markup language that is made up of specific features. XML uses tags, first of all, and you can recognize a tag because it is included into this angular bracket, and whatever is outside the brackets is called the content. That is essentially what you are tagging. It's the plain text that you have. And into the brackets, you can have an element, which is essentially the core element of the tag, the core part of the tag, which has essentially a name. So, for example, in the second in the second encoding example that I have, we have div, which is the name of the element in this case. That is a textual division. It has an attribute, which is a way of defining some kind of specific definition to the element, to the tag in this case, which has also a value, which may or may not be mandatory, or can have a set of mandatory values. And obviously, as I said, the content. So an XML document must be well-formed, which means that all the tags must be properly closed within the angular brackets. All the tags must be nested properly. That means that they have to be contained by all ancestors, and the whole document must be contained by one element that is named root. Notice that a well-formed XML document is not necessarily a valid document. A valid document is something that you validate against a schema. And you can validate your document by associating it to a schema that you provide, essentially. And the validation goes on as a parser, which is a specific purpose program that checks that your document is conformant to all the specifications that are given in the schema. So it essentially checks if all the mandatory locations for the tags or I don't know, value ranges for the attributes are properly located, and that everything is in place and conforms to that particular schema. So not in general to the extensible markup language. So what is TI? TI, Text Encoding Initiative, is a type of inline markup language. And it also provides actually not just one schema, but a variety of sub-schemes. So as a markup language, it has elements, it has attributes, it has a basic schema, which also can be customized. So the idea behind TI was to, give a variety of indications for creating digital publications and text in machine-readable format that should have been as flexible as possible, with very few mandatory parts. So the main reference, if you want to learn TI, is obviously the TI guidelines, but there is also a very active community and mailing lists that are willing to provide help to you. And what you have to know is that the guidelines are just essentially very flexible suggestions. So they can be adapted to specific needs, and they are designed to be flexible. So for example, there have been varieties of sub-schemes. So for example, IPDoc is a sub-scheme that selects a range of features from TI for a very specific purpose, that is to create machine-readable text from text-bearing objects, essentially. And as a general thing that you need in order to understand the guidelines, TI provides various types of grouping information. The most important one is the modules, which we are going to deal with quite thoroughly. The modules declare particular elements and attributes that have structural aspects in common. And essentially, these structural aspects are taken as from a semantic ground, which means that these elements that belong to the same module are considered part of a specific description structure. So for example, if you have a bibliography or the critical apparatus, these modules, or the dictionary as well, these modules essentially group all the element declarations and the attribute declarations that are considered as comprehensively as possible as useful for describing those types of things. And just the most important one, the most important module is the core module, which is recommended. That means that you should use it in any TI document, and it contains just basic elements, the basic structural elements, and the header, which essentially provides the metadata to your document or to your edition. Then we have the classes that group the features of elements and the attributes. And the concept behind the class is that or the elements and the attributes that belong to one class inherit, that means have all the features of that class. And there are also subclasses which also inherit the features of the superclasses. And then we have macros and data types. There are essentially big groups of frequently used models, either models or data types. So I think that we are done with the basic part, and now I think that I should give Stelios some space.
Yes, hello also from my part. I hope you can hear me, and now I will try also to share my screen. Hope it will work. It doesn't really work. I'm sorry about that. Screen share. Why it doesn't work? You are presenting to everyone?
Stelios, try to share the screen, and then after that I will put you in the presentation mode, because I don't know if there is a problem with that. So try to share your screen.
Yeah. It should be...
You have to share the entire desktop.
That is this green thing at the
yes,
side.
the green icon, and then you have to choose not only the Google Hangout, but desktop. Now, I don't know in German, I don't remember. I don't know if you're...
It doesn't give me any
okay.
possibilities. Is it possible that Chiara shares the screen?
Yeah, I was about to say that. I can share my screen while you present.
Okay, no problem.
It's obvious how it will work. Thank you very much, Chiara. I'm sorry for that.
No, it happens. Every week we have a surprise with Hangout, so Stelios, don't worry. Okay, so I put, Chiara, okay, now we have, but I can't see. Okay, yes, now we have the screen. Okay, excellent.
That's it. That's wonderful. Now, let me explain first, on the basis of what Chiara just said, why we put dictionaries and geography and dictionaries together. It is a decision that we took on the basis. Now we can change the screen, Chiara. It's a decision that we took on the basis of a common feature that these two scientific or scholarly genres have. It is a very high level of complexity, and it's a complexity in terms of internal structures they have, in terms of external reference. In both genres, we have a great density of references that refer to things that are not in the text. And in both genres, we have also a high density of information that is presented often in a very compressed form. The second reason is that very often in these genres, we have, because of this complexity, severe inconsistencies. And of course, if you want to have create an edition on the basis of a valid schema, inconsistencies are a problem. You have to solve them, or at least you have to find a way to cope with them. The third common feature is that the fact that the linearity of the textual form, these genres are presented in a linear textual form, impedes the clear and structured presentation of the information. Especially for dictionaries, we have actually lists or catalogs with attributes. To present them in a linear textual form means that you add material that is not always necessary and not always an advantage for the structure. In our print culture, or in the print culture, different typographical structures have been developed. They are extremely complex to accommodate for the logical and structural complexity of these two genres. And TI-XML is actually some way to try to somehow reflect these typographical structures, or at least give a way to digitize them, to represent them digitally, especially for places, distances, and dictionary structures. It tries to provide a sufficient device to annotate these texts, both on the level of the logical structure and on the level of representation. In this effort, of course, not everything is perfect, and we will see where some interesting limits are reached, and we can discuss or reflect upon these limits. Could we go to the next slide, Chiara? Now, I will start talking about, give you a small introduction about dictionaries, and I say that it's a small introduction, apologizing. I'm going to present it extremely condensed, and of course, the huge variety of dictionaries cannot be reflected in this very, very tiny presentation. First of all, we have to remember that speaking of dictionaries, we are not speaking of one genre, but we are actually speaking of several genres. Dictionaries are organized on the basis of two fundamentally different approaches. There are dictionaries that start from words and the terminology we use is semasiological dictionaries. We call them semasiological dictionaries in general. On the other side, there are dictionaries that start from notions. I know, of course, the term notion is very, very problematic. The question if there are notions outside of words or different from the words is a huge philosophical and linguistic problem. But in any case, we have dictionaries that start from notions and go to words, give us words of how to express this notion. We call them, these dictionaries with different names. One of these names is onomasiological dictionaries. There is a huge variety depending on the purpose of the dictionary. We have, for example, monolingual and bilingual or multilingual dictionaries. We have dictionaries that concentrate or focus on the etymology of words. We have dictionaries of technical terms, authors or genres dictionaries, and this catalog is only the very, very, very beginning of the huge list. And of course, we have genres that combine several features from different genres. That means we have hybrids that are created in the quite long history of the lexicographic genre. Even if we have a very pure genre of a dictionary, let's say a monolingual semasiological dictionary, we find in any case that it integrates different types of information concerning different linguistic levels: phonological, morphological, syntax, semantics, and very often also pragmatics. So the different genre means actually that we cover up a very big variety, a very big informational variety, and it's a problem or a challenge of how to represent it digitally. Can we go to the next slide? On the other hand, very different ways to structure the material. Although in the lexicographical and science of lexicography, we have reached a kind of consensus, and we speak at least basic structure and the structure. The macro structure is the overall principle of organization of the material, and there we have two different approaches. The one is by a purely conventional principle, which is the alphabetic organization is the most well-known of these purely conventional principles. And the other one, which is called onomastic organization, but has also very different other names, is an organization on the base of semantic or word fields. It is a logical organization, or to say it like that, an ontological organization of the lexical material. Now, on the level of, we are dealing with the ways in which each entry is organized. That means which elements are present and how elements are ordered. We will see some examples when we will try to represent in TI XML some small entries of dictionaries that I will show you. Can we go to the next slide? Now, how TI allows us to encode print dictionaries. I repeat that my general aim now, and is a different than that of Tariq later, is to encode ancient texts similar in type and function to modern print dictionaries. That means that we are dealing with the encoding of print products. An important issue here is that we are invited to annotate explicit and implicit information in order to enable, first of all, various types of visualization, second, connections between different dictionaries, and third, extraction of quantitative data, which is impossible to do or extremely hard to do if you have a print product. Important is also as an aim to try to apply actually modern categories and models of organizing dictionaries to ancient texts, to ancient dictionaries. Last, we will see and we'll try to experience the limits of TI XML with dictionaries that are not in a catalog similar structure and have complex, not clearly structured material. Can we go to the next one? I give you a first example of an entry of a word, the word, which means annotation, in a bilingual dictionary, in the Oxford Latin Dictionary. And what I have done here, what you see in your screen, is actually the information, the text of this entry without any typographical markup. I have put simply the words as they appear, taking away bold, italic, small, capital, and whatever typographical device the dictionary uses to organize its material. And slide. Can we change? And once more, please. Yes. This is now the lemma, the entry ad notatio, and as you can see clearly, can you go to the previous one, Chiara? Doesn't matter. As you can see clearly, the typographical devices are very, very important in order to see the entry, to be able to understand what's going on there, not to see a sea of words. Now, let me give you some information about the structure of this entry, and at the same time, introduce some of the terminology that we use in the TI module dictionaries. At the head, we have something, the overall entity is an entry, and it is the big red rectangle. Now, on the upper top, we have something that we can call head word in our everyday language. In TI XML, is called form. And then several senses, 3 in our entry, follow. And for each sense, we have first sense, which is marked with the number 1. We have the definitions A, which is not there at all, and the definition B, which is marked a note or comment. The definition A is the writing or making of notes. Now, in smaller letters below follow cited quotations, or examples, as we can call them, also organized in A, which is not present, and in B. And each quotation has a small text, and then the reference to the author where we can find these words. Now, this basic structure, an entry as a whole, and then the form, the senses, their definitions, and some examples, is the basic structure of a dictionary entry also in TEI. Let me more about definition, and if we can go to the next one. Chiara, the next one. Yes. Different types of dictionaries use different ways to define a sense. If we have an etymological dictionary, you understand that we will have different kind of information. If we have a dictionary of synonyma, you understand we will have a different way to define the meaning of a word. If we have a bilingual dictionary, perhaps we have a translation, or we have a definition, or we have a paraphrase in a monolingual dictionary. TEI does not distinguish among these types, principally. All of them are definitions and can be encoded through the def element. Let's go to the next one and try to start encoding. Chiara, press enter 3 times and we will see everything there. Now, what we have to do now is try to find out what is explicitly stated in our head word and what is not explicitly stated, but implicitly. The word ad notatio is clear, and this is the basic form. What follows afterwards is the declaration of the genitive. In the declaration of the genitive, we have also an implicit information that this noun belongs to the third declension class. Afterwards, we have an F, and we have to be able to understand what it means. It means female, and here we have also an implicit information that this is a noun. And then follows an clearly explicit information, which is the etymology of the word, how it is produced. The interplay between implicit and explicit information is important because it is important for our strategy. What are we going to encode? How much implicit information we want to include? And if we think it is important, how deep are we going into explaining this explicit information? Now, let me start encoding this entry. If we go to the next one. We give it a number as entry number 1. We declare the form, which is the form ad notatio. And then, this is the basic structure. And then we start representing the various senses it has with numbers 1, 2, 3. And then under sub-senses with A and B. And we use the def element in order to put the text there that is the definition of the sense A. So a combination of abstract and concrete information that is in the dictionary in order to create a schema that can be read by a machine. And this to the end. Now, this is the basic structure. If we go to the next one, we will try to discuss a different possibility for bilingual dictionaries, especially for bilingual dictionaries, which is our example. Press it once more, Chiara, if you want. This is what we have done with sense and definition. And the other possibility is to use the sit or the cite element, declare that it is a translation, declare also the language of the translation, and then use quote in order to quote the translation of this sense. You understand that this is not really correct, because the writing or making of notes is not really the translation of adnotatio. It is an explanation of what adnotatio may mean, and here we have two different translations. One, writing notes, the other one, making notes. So we have to decide if it is really correct for us to cite it, to encode it using the CIT possibility, or to encode it, as I think it is better, the definition possibility, and encode really only translations using the CIT element. Let's go to the grammatical now information. Press it once more, Chiara, if you want. Yes. On the head word, we have quite a bunch of grammatical information. First of all, we have the orthographical form of the word. We have also what part of speech it is. It is a noun. We have also the gender. It is a female. We have the declension type that we understand through the genitive. And we have also expressed the case, the genitive here, which is the form adnotationis. We can encode all this information using the element grammatical group, and then go on to encode also the etymology after finishing the encoding of the form. Now, I simply present that very quickly. You can read everything in the manual in order to show you how we try to encode different levels or linguistic levels that are nevertheless all present in one and the same entry. Let's go to the next slide. Now, encoding the quoted examples is not very much different. We use again the CIT element, and then the quote and the bibliographical element in order to put the reference in it, the reference to the work where the phrase comes from. As you see, our dictionary in the print form has a structure where the two different definitions are put together, and then with A and B, and then the two examples, the two sets of examples, are also put together with A and B. We will not encode it like that. We will encode it putting direct after the first definition, the first set of examples, and direct after the second definition, the second set of examples. So we will have to alter a little bit the way the material is structured, the microstructure of the dictionary. Let's go to the next one, please. After having this very, very small introduction, let me now show you an effort to encode an ancient Greek lexicon. The lexicon of the so-called Antiathesis is a lexicon of the 2nd century CE. It is severely epitomized, and this is good, or I mean, it makes our life easier because the material is better structured and it is less. And it has a main aim as a dictionary to argue for the extension of the canonical vocabulary, saying or pointing to uses of words that were not in the canonical vocabulary of the time, to uses of the words in canonical authors. I have brought you an example, and we can see it now in the next. First of all, about the model of microstructures in the Antiathesis. It is clearly structured, as I said, and has mainly two different models of microstructure. First of all, lemma, afterwards the meaning, and then some sources, or lemma, some grammatical information, and then sources. Let's see the first one. The text, I have here simply the translation. Bios is the word, and then the text reads, for livelihood. Herodotus, Menander in Demiurgos, this is a comedy of Menander. Eupolis in Naiges, a comedy of Eupolis. The poet several times. Now, the poet is Homer in the diction of the time. And here you see an attempt to annotate this entry. We start with the element entry, of course, then the form, that it is bios, then the sense and the definition for livelihood, and then several site elements with bibliography when only the author is mentioned, or here I have put only bibliography. In the next example, we will see how we can split it down and make some more explicit declarations about how much information is in there. So let's see the next example. The next example reads, which is grammatical information, Argyria, in plural, not in singular. So you should use this word in plural and not in singular, as Platon in Cleophon does. And now my attempt to annotate it. Again, the same basic structure. Here comes a new element in play, and this is the element usage, an extremely flexible element. We can accommodate several. It is a in order to annotate the information in plural, not in singular, because here it is not a sense of the word, but only an information of how we should use it. Then the sit element, again, I split it down in order to see the possibilities. In a bibliographical element, we have the personal name Plato, and then the title in Cleophon. If we annotate in that way, of course, we get access into much more information than if we annotate only using the bibliographical element. Let's go to the next dictionary now. It is the lexicon of Harpocration. It is a lexicon, again, of the 2nd century CE, perhaps. It's called Lexicon of the 10 Orators. Harpocration explains vocabulary, mainly but not exclusively technical vocabulary, that rhetorical texts of the 5th and especially of the 4th century BCE used. This is a lexicon that is not epitomized, and it is not clearly structured. I only mentioned the microstructural models, that the microstructural models may contain the lemma, the meaning, grammatical information, example and sources, and various remarks. I didn't give you a list of different microstructures in this lexicon because it is something that we still have to do. We have to study this dictionary and list down the different microstructural models. It is interesting that we can find the text of this dictionary with an English translation in a very, very interesting project. I have here the link. It is in the Harpocration project, and this is where I take the translation I will give you from a lemma. If we go to the next slide. Now, the lemma is abios, and that means either somebody who has no money or somebody who is very rich, because of the different meanings of the prefix a. In the lemma, in the entry, we read antiphon applied abios to one who has acquired great wealth, as Homer calls a much-wooded wood axilos. Now, again, the general entry, the form abios, these are very clear elements there. For the sense, I propose now, or I try to figure out how I can give a hint what abios mean in our modern language, because I find it important for that specific lemma. I use here a very powerful but also very somehow dangerous element, which is attribute, sorry, which is the analytical attribute, and I give it wealthy as as an entry. What we have afterwards is something that is called definition, of course, but it is much less structured than the definitions we have seen in the anti-attacist lexicon. And this is because the text, the dictionary, is not a catalog here. It is actually a running text that gives us this information. If we want to annotate that text, I don't see any other possibility than to put the chunk of text in the def element, although it would be better if we could split it down. The only thing we can do here, or I at least see that, is to declare the personal name antiphon. And then what we lose is actually the connection between the word axilos and the word abios, because everything is put in a very, very crude element as a note, as Homer calls a much-wooded wood axilos, but we don't create here a very concrete reference between the two informations. It is possible to do that, but it requires much more annotational labor, and the whole thing becomes extremely complex. I have not found yet good examples where such elements are connected with each other, although the possibility theoretically is there. Let's go to the last one. No, that's now for you, Chiara. Thank you very much, and I'm sorry.
Stelios, thank you. It was really very, very interesting, very dense. So, but now I think we can go on with geography, and then we can discuss, because there are many interesting things.
So, can you see my screen?
Yes.
And I think it's starting.
Yes, it works.
Can you hear and can you see? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I will first give you a very short introduction about what pre-modern geographical texts are and why we can consider them a technical genre or not, actually. So I am taking case studies from, obviously, my own field of expertise, which is geographical literature for Greeks and Romans, which essentially is divided into various types of sources that I kind of summarized here. We've got Pericles, which are essentially lists of places that are divided by distances along the coastal lines that were essentially born during colonization for the Greeks. And then we have the perigesis or periodoi, which are literally guided tours around, mainly on the mainland, and a subgenre, which is a chorographia, which is a very peculiar geographical type to define. And then we have the land equivalent of the Pericles, which are itineraria, that are essentially lists of stations and distances that are peculiar to the Roman road network. We have, obviously, a list of authors that we can consider geographical, largely. We have the major geographers, and of some of them, many of you probably heard of. We have Ptolemy, we have Pausanias, we have Strabo, we have Pliny, we have Pomponius Mela, and so on. And then we have the so-called minor geographers, that are essentially people whose identities we know nothing about, who wrote these very short opuscles that essentially summarize the very technical essence of this type of literature. So these opuscles are particularly important to our purposes because of the density of information that they have, not because they were written by famous geographers or they contain very precious information, but because they offer us very short instances of very, very technical and very to-the-point geographical literature. So one very important thing that we have to consider when dealing with this type of geographies is that they go essentially beyond our notion of geography as a map. We live essentially in a world of maps. We do not find any type of orientation in space without having an image, a diagrammatic representation of space. For these people, it was not like that because cartography was essentially a scientific way of graphically representing the world, and it was used for very different purposes than traveling, because it was too abstract in order to be used in actual navigation. So the notion of space of pre-modern societies in general, not only of Greeks and Romans, was empirical. It was functional to travel and to spatial practice. And so the way they describe space, their geographical literature, is essentially the only thing that they had for traveling. And this is very important. So the problem is we are in presence of a system of concepts, of expressions, of words that were specifically used for giving information on how to navigate and gain orientation in space. So the problem is this a technical genre? Is this something that can be systematized somehow or not? And we will see that there are various components of this way of expressing space. And here we have a very, very short summary of them. We've got distances, obviously. And distances are a very key notion for the description of space in ancient geography. And they are one of the most difficult things to encode in digital editions, because the numerical estimate of the distance depends on the concrete conditions of travel, which means that the distance between two places in the ancient world is conditioned by the concrete, the weather, by the season, by the modes of traveling, and so on. And there are several units of measurement in the widest way possible. So you've got different units of measurement according to the period, according to the context. You can have several units in the same source, in the same text, in the same sentence, and so on. And also, we have two ways of measuring spatial extents. There are time and space, essentially. So you not only have the classical space units of measurement, such as states or meters and so on, but you also have days or evenings or nights or days plus nights and so on. Then we have systems of orientation that belong to two different genres. They are essentially fixed, one conventional system of orientation that is made of fixed points that can be winds, stars, cardinal points, compass points, and so on, or unfixed reference points that are obviously subject to environmental or cultural conditioning. And then we have all the aspects that belong to the conceptualization of space. That is essentially the association between places and concepts. So one example that I always make in order to make this understandable is the boundaries. The Greeks associated the boundaries of the inhabited world to peripheral peoples, to barbarians, essentially. So there is this kind of overlap between a concept and a place that in this case is also expressed by means of an ethnic. So you can see that there are different degrees of semantic conceptualization of space. And I will show you what I mean by these types of examples by taking one very easy instance, which is a kind of Pericles, the Stelios of the Great Sea, which belongs to that type of minor geographers that I mentioned before. So in this type of text, which is essentially a list of distances and of directions between places, we have, obviously, first of all, the named entities that are the places, essentially. Then we have the categories to which these places are associated, which can be typologies, a town promontory, that can be obviously human settlements or natural settlements or whatever you can imagine, essentially. And we can have types of distances that essentially establish a relation between these types of named entities that have obviously units of measurement, numbers, and so on. Then we have the directions, which I mentioned. We have the compass points, we have the established winds, we have various types of indications that use unfixed reference points. So for example, the last one, beyond the city, is obviously an unfixed way of referencing to orientation. And if you look at it a little bit more thoroughly, you can see that the strings of text that connect places and directions or distances are essentially relations. And this is a very important thing to highlight. This is the system through which these sources describe space, relations between named entities or spatial entities. I like to use this one because obviously it's not just about place names, but it's about places in the largest sense possible. you've got essentially two places, place A and place B, and you have various types of nodes that connect these places. It can have a distance estimate, you can have a direction, you can have some kind of underspecified indication, or you can have all three of them, two of them, or even none of them sometimes. So you have also some degrees of implicit relation. So there are some reasons why we can consider the geographical language technical, because it was a specific system made up of concepts and paradigms that had a very empirical purpose, obviously. So these people had a specific way of encoding this type of spatial information by means of language. On the other hand, for us, this type of geographical language is not technical, not yet, because essentially for two reasons. Because it had a very high degree of implicit information. It has a very strong variability in the linguistic representation of this information that obviously can vary according to the context, according to the period, according to the purpose of the author, to the type of text that we have, because we also have poetry, for example, and so on. So the problem is, how can we meaningfully encode this type of information in digital edition, and if we can at all? So I'm going to give you some examples of how these types of problems are currently addressed in XML in TI, essentially, and I'm going to highlight the advantages of that and the disadvantages of that. A very important preliminary observation that I have to do is that you should choose your strategy according to the results that you want and to the applications that you want for your particular document. So TI is an option that has a fairly good amount of advantages because it provides guidelines, which are at the same time not mandatory, so you can select a range of features that are actually useful for you. It has a large community, which is willing to help. It does not demand a lot of time to be learned, which is obviously an important aspect. But it's not the only option, obviously. So you can create your own schema if you think that you need a very specific one. And there are also other methods. And some of you at this point may know that I am actually a fan of standoff annotation. That means that you can also do the other way around. You can start from a different type of information gathering, information collection, and then use TI XML in order to organize and structure the type of information. Maybe TI is not the best option if your document have a very specific semantic demand, but it can provide a model for a different type of XML encoding. So we start with the most simple, the simplest thing, but actually the most important thing for digital edition, which is place names, essentially. So we have place names in TI and in various subschemes, particularly EpiDoc. Place names are essentially named entities, so they belong to the larger ensemble of types of entities that are structured in a very similar way. So, for example, you can find similar strategies of encoding for personal names, for example. A place name in TI contains an absolute or relative place name, and it can also be nested with various types of specification, particularly the geographical name that contains a name which is associated to some geographical feature, which can be, for example, Mount Rushmore, which belongs to physical geography, obviously. And it can be nested with geof_feat, which is a geographical feature that indicates the further specification of the geographical of the name of the geographical feature. So in the case of Mount Rushmore, it would be Mount. And so you should nest everything according to the types of geographical name, geographical entities that you find. This is just an example, and you can see that if you want to encode every single type of place name in a very dense document, as in this opuscule, which is actually one of the minor geographers in an English translation, it turns out to be very, very specific. And one thing that I would advise you to do is actually to use the type attribute, either for the geographical names or for the place names, because it is likely that you encounter very different types of entities, of spatial entities. And the only rule that you have in this case is that you should be consistent with your own type of document, obviously. One very important thing that is strongly advised in the case of projects that tag named entities is to create or to refer to authority lists. Named entities obviously refer to some kind of vocabulary. And for place names, we are actually very lucky because we can count on external authority lists, which are gazetteers of place names. And for classical sources, Greco-Roman sources in particular, we got Pleiades, which is an external authority list, obviously. You can refer to external authority lists by the attribute, which is called reference, which points to an external reference in the form of a URI, in this case in Pleiades. Or you can make your own authority list by means of the element list place, which essentially contains a list of places that you can store in a separate XML document, which you make your own. So for example, in this case, you use the ref attribute, which refers to the URI in the gazetteer. So it is an external database, an external reference list. And one thing that I would advise you to do is to use the reference to the nym of the name. So the nym is the canonical form of the named entity. It doesn't indicate the entity itself or the place itself. It just indicates the standard form of the name, which is particularly useful if you envisage to use this document for other purposes. So for example, to establish an authority list or an index, or to create a map with the types of with the names that you have here, or if you have a strong variations in the way place names are expressed. In all those cases, it is very advisable that you use the nym ref to refer to the standard form of the name. Another occurrence which is particularly tricky to address in TI is the encoding of spatial relations. There are essentially two ways of encoding spatial relations. One is by means of the element location. Now, the element location defines two types of description of a spatial position. One is a set of geographical coordinates, which is a standard system such as KML or GML and so on. Unfortunately, we do not have that in historical sources, or at least we do not have a very standardized modern system. Or we have a set of instructions, which is obviously the most typical thing for historical document of this type of dimension. And in this case, we used a nesting strategy between location and offset. The element offset marks the part of a relative dimension indicating the direction of this relation between places. And notice that it can also be used for times to encode vague temporal information, essentially. So in this case, for example, if you have the description of an offset, a very simple one actually, create near Peloponnesus off Cape Malea, the set of instruction can be encoded by means of nesting the location with the offset, with a further specification of the types of geographical names that you find. So in this case, it simply defines the position by means of nested elements. The second strategy is the use of the element relation, which describes a kind of relationship or linkage amongst a specified group of places, or also events or persons or objects. So it's a very, very general element, which also has some kind of standoff-like flavor, and you will see why. Essentially, the relation has to be used within the element which is called list relation. And the list relation essentially provides a list of relationships defined amongst named entities, essentially, which can be expressed or not expressed. So one good thing about the element relation is that it allows you to express something that would normally be implicit, which is very, very likely in the description of relationships among places. So for example, one thing that you need to establish is a preliminary list of places that are involved into the relation. And then you describe the relation by means of the attribute name, which is mandatory, that needs to be a description of the type of relation that you have, and a further attribute which defines the hierarchy of the relation. Now, one characteristic of relation, which is also a limitation of that, is that relation can only describe a relation which is mutual or passive or active, essentially. So there are just three types of relation that you can define. And so this is part of the disadvantages of relation, that in a high semantic variety of things, which we typically find in historical documents, you have a very strict type of semantic relation that you can encode. And also, as I showed you, it requires a type of markup which is actually not incorporated in the text itself. And it requires you to create a list of places in order to encode the relation. And pure place lists are quite rare in historical documents. Concerning location or offset, on the other hand, you have a poor semantic specification of the nature of the relation, because the relation is essentially relied on the nesting strategy. So in these two cases, you have more advantages if you want to encode the types between places. And that I will show you is this is a contains some kind of quantity expresses the word or string or numbers quantity that is type quantity essentially, or a commodity name, or some other types of things, numbers, and so on. And in the case of historical sources, you have to know, as I said, that there are not only various types of units of measurement, but that there are two types of measurement of distances that are fundamental, that is time and space. So you have types, essentially, of things that you probably need to encode in both cases. And one thing that I did here is to add a unit type that is not strictly related to the unit of measurement that is used in the text in particular, which is stayed, but to specify the nature of that unit, which is space and not time. If it was days, for example, in this case 3080, 100 states, it would have been unit time, which is a very simple strategy that can be used in order to have a larger idea about the type of units that are used to describe distances in a particular document. Now, obviously, the disadvantages are that there is poor specification of types, that you cannot really rely on an established standardized list of units of measurement by any means, because we don't have any. There is no standard reference for the equivalence of ancient units of measurement. I didn't even attempt to give you an equivalent between the states, the measurements that I have in states, or days or nights or whatever, with any kind of modern measurement, because simply there isn't any. And obviously, the third and most important thing is a relation in itself, as we mentioned before. So how do we write that? How do we encode that there is essentially a relationship between two nodes and an edge by means of an XML element? And also, obviously, implicit information, because not always, for example, the nodes, the places involved into a relationship of distance are explicit in the text. Actually, most of the times they are not. So the problem in this case is to find a strategy for tagging spatial relations that is not so much time-consuming as it would be with normal nesting strategies, but that is meaningful at the same time. And also, we need a standardized reference structure for either for the semantic relations that we have, for the semantics of the relations that we have between spatial entities, and for the linguistic expression for the description of space that we have in historical documents. And this is something that we still need and that we are working on at the moment. So there is no definite answer to these things at the moment. And the fourth thing is the integration with other types of relational markup. As I mentioned, I am a fan of other types of markup as well for encoding relations between entities. So another way of doing that would be to integrate a different type of relational markup with digital editions that are based on TI or Epidoc. But this is still to come, obviously. So I'm going to show you very quickly some simple application of encoding geographical text. So what you can do with these types of strategies of encoding geographical entities. Now, one very simple thing that you can do just by means of a careful tagging of place names and types of place names is to apply an XSLT transformation in order to create an index. This is a very raw index of one of the minor Greek geographers. So you have the places referenced here, and by means of the specification of the type, you can have, for example, in this case, just the toponyms, essentially, but you could have also the type of the ethnics, if you specify that, or natural features, or human features, or whatever you specify into the type of, as a value of the type. Then you have, obviously, all the normalized names, which is the names, which I advise you to encode, essentially. And then you have the entries, obviously. And you can set the XSL transformation in a way that it also gives to you the exact position of the name into the document. And another thing, as I mentioned, I am particularly a fan of doing the other way around, of standoff markup or standoff annotation. Now, there are various cases where you can annotate, essentially, and georeference the places that are mentioned into a document. And by georeferencing, I mean giving them coordinates based them on gazetteers, essentially, and integrating all those data into a possible TI or epidoc edition or machine-readable format, or whatever type you want. And in that case, you can categorize places as any type of feature. So, for example, here in the first example, you can see, again, the types of the places represented in Quantum GIS in different colors according to the type that they belong to. Or you can just visualize the ethnics, for example, in a document. Or a more advanced application would be to use a different type of linked open data application. In this case, the application programming interfaces taken from Pelagios. And in this case, obviously, this is a very advanced application which allows you to do various types of experiments and mashups with the spatial data that you have. In this case, for example, you can visualize the spatial footprint of a text by means of the APIs that are taken from a different project. So it's not technically your annotation. It's an annotation taken from data that belongs to someone else by the means of linked open data projects. So I think that we are good with the time. And now I should give, I think it's the turn of Tariq and of Stelios for dynamic lexicon.
Okay, good. So okay, Tariq.
Yeah. Hello again. Stelios, would you like to give an introduction to the dynamic lexicon, or can I start directly?
I think you can start.
Okay.
Tariq, yes.
Did you need me to show the slides to share the screen?
Yeah, please.
Okay, okay.
And now we will present the dynamic lexicon, which was part of the digital fragment historicum.
Fragmenta Historicorum Graecorum.
Yeah, exactly.
Tariq is, we can say that Tariq is a computer scientist. He's working with Greek, Latin, and other texts in other languages. So he's doing a big effort to work with this text.
So the aim of this project was to create training data for our automatic alignment system. Chiara, could you please move to the next slide, the next one? Also the next one? Yeah, here. We want to create training data for an automatic alignment system for Greek and Latin parallel text. So we don't have actually the a Greek Latin lexicon bilingual. We have Greek English or Latin English. So the idea was to use English as a pivot language or third language to create a Greek Latin pairs. So we have on digital library digital library a set of translated documents, Greek English and Latin English, about 104 works, Greek and English, and about 59 Latin English. So these texts are parallel, and we used them Morse bilingual sentence aligner to align them at the sentence level. Then the program GZA++ is used to align the sentence pairs at the level of individual words. So we have already the Greek English aligned at word level, and the Latin English aligned at the word level as well. So we can see that we have about 210,000 sentences Greek English and 132,000 sentences Latin English. We can move to the next slide. Yeah. So the first step was to collect the text, then parse it to move from sentence to translation pairs, to have the Greek English translation pairs and Latin English translation pairs. Then combine the translation using English as a bridge between Greek and Latin. So after that, we have the Greek and Latin together. We filter the result to get the result with high accuracy. The next slide, please. Here we have an example that the source text, the Greek English and Latin English, is available as XML files in this structure that we have the sentence, the idea of the sentence, then a list of the Greek words, here in this example, the Latin words and the translation. Each word, each Latin word has an ID and an reference, which means the English word that it is aligned. We can see here in the image on the right side that the ELOC is aligned to there, and up aligned to from, and osteo aligned to door. So the same for Greek. If we can move to the next one, here we can find one-to-one alignment. Here in this example, it is Greek English. We can see one-to-many alignment, like Kai aligned to and. So the first step was to parse this text on to get the translation pairs and calculate the probabilities. In this example, we can see that the Latin word "et" occurred about 55,000 times in our corpus, and it translated to, or it is aligned to, and 88% to semicolon, 2.5% to semicolon, and on the list of translations. So we can see like that we have some errors. These errors are occurred because the alignment is done using the GZA++ software. It's not manual alignment. So we have some errors, as we can see, about 3% or 4% errors. If you can move to the next one. So the first step is to deal with these errors, to filter the result, deleting these errors. In this case, we can find that it is aligned to and. The next one, please. Yeah. The second step is the lemmatization. So as we know that Latin and Greek are inflected languages, whereas English is weakly inflected language. So as we can see that in these three different examples, that filian is aligned to daughter, filiae aligned to daughter, and philia is aligned to daughter. So the first step was to align to lematize the Greek and Latin words, and using the next one, please. Yeah, as you can see in this image, that we take the lemma, filia is aligned to daughter. The next one. And here is the same with the Greek. We have three different examples. Three words are aligned to the same word son in English, so we can replace these words with the lemma. The lemmatization is done using Morpheus. I don't want every one of us, I guess, know about Morpheus. Morpheus is a morphological is a web service provide us morphological analysis for Greek and Latin. So the next one, please. Here we can see also the lemmatization of English translations, that this Greek word is aligned to say, speak. I'm sorry, I cannot read in Greek letters, so always I say this Greek word. So this word is aligned to say, speak, tell, speaking, say, sing. So we can say that if we lemmatize the English words, we can have better results and more accurate results. So we lemmatize the English words, and we have at the end only 4 candidates: say, speak, tell, and mention. The next one, please. Yeah, then we used that triangulation. That triangulation is we have Greek English and English Latin. In this case we match between the Greek and Latin using the English. For example, the word city is aligned to polis, to the Greek word polis, on the Latin words civitas. So we can say that polis and civitas are translation to each other. I will show the demo now, and then we will be back to the. I will share my screen. But also I have problem with sharing the screen. So can you see the demo, the website now?
Yes.
Yeah. Here is the website is available under dynamiclexicon.com. Here we have a user interface to present our results. Here we can write the word like, for example, city, and we select the language is English, and we can see the results is city is aligned to Polish. Here I took the lemma, as I said, lemmatization will give better results onto civitatis. And here we can see the examples from our corpus. Here are the aligned text. In this case, if I take polis here and select Greek, I'll have like polis is aligned to city 70%, to state 18%, to Athens, to town. As we can see here, Athens is we can say it is alignment error or here off, because polis doesn't mean, as far as I know, it doesn't mean Athens. And here we can see.
But this is an interesting example, because we have to see the text. In this case, yeah. Polis was used to refer to Athens. So this is a very interesting, so we can consider it a mistake, but of course we have to explain that. So I think this is an interesting example.
Here we can see that polis is translated to city and state, I took only the best 2 or 3 translation. And city is translated to civitatis, so we can see that we can take like polis and civitatis is translation pair on the same civitas, sorry. On polis and urbs are also the same. Here, as you can see, I took the lemma. Here also the state, status. So you can write also, if we can select the language, CV. As you can see, also the same. Yeah, and here we have the examples on the line. So this website or this web service is available under dynamiclexicon.com. You can access it and use it. And here you can find more details in this paper. I have written this paper with Dr. Monica Berti to explain the dynamic lexicon in more details, if you are interested about that. And then I will be back to the presentation.
So we should. So how many slides do you still have?
3 or 4, just the evaluation of.
Okay, because then
if you want, I can stop here. It's not.
No. If you have, if you.
It's nothing important. Just some mathematical equations. Maybe you are not interested in.
No, we are interested. The problem is that it's a bit late because this session was really very interesting with many interesting things. Okay, here we have the slides. You can comment them.
Yeah, here is the triangulation process. We can move to the next one. Here is the example that we can the cities translate to polis and to Latin words civitas and orbs. So we can have 6 candidates, but all these candidates don't have the same accuracy or the same probability. So we have used Jaggard coefficient to give an accuracy or a value to the translation pair to say this translation pair is better than the other. So this is the form. I will not explain more about the mathematics. So we can move to the next slide. If we have these values on this number, the next one. Yeah, also numbers. The next one. The next slide, please. Yeah, here how to evaluate the results. The next one, please. We took 200 translation pairs on the next one, please. And we assigned each pair one of 4 values. If this pair is correct, incorrect, there is small difference, big difference, and we give a rank for each value. Correct, we give 1. The small difference 0.75, big difference 0.25, and incorrect 0. So we found that if the Jaggard value is greater than 90%, we have accuracy about 94%. If the Jaggard value is greater than 80%, we have also more accuracy. That is the last slide. We can see that the quality of our method of our program depends on the aligned corpora. If the corpora is aligned manually, we will have more efficient results. And here the quality of the aligner on the size of the corpora. When we have more, the bigger corpora produce better translation probability distribution on more candidates. So that was from my side, and I hope that I could summarize everything in 10 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much, Tariq. And I can add that so this project, so the dynamic lexicon, was started a few years ago from the Perseus project. Now Tariq is applying it to a specific collection, which is the Fragmenti Historicorum Graecorum, so for aligning the Greek text of the fragment and the Latin translation. So that's why he mentioned that. But of course, we have many different applications for the dynamic lexicon. So, but now we have, well, many guests. Do you have questions for Chiara, Stelios, and Tariq? We have a big audience. Yes, yes, Alexandri, we have a big audience, so please, you can ask. If you want, you can unmute yourself and you can ask. Oh, okay. In the chat, we have a question in the chat. I don't know if someone can answer.
I'm sorry, but I cannot answer.
Yeah, I will put this question also in the YouTube.
It's an interesting question in any case.
Mm. Mm. No, we should think about that. This is a big big question. So we can keep maybe Alexandra, if you can, because we have the YouTube channel and we can also put comments below the video, so we can keep them and so people can answer to this question. Yes, exactly, Gabby. Thank you. Of course, you can ask the digital class.
Yeah, I would suggest also the TI and the markup list.
Definitely, definitely.
Those are very competent people in the field, so I think that they might have the answer.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. You can join those lists and ask people.
Yeah, it is strongly recommended. There one. Yeah.
Yes. Other questions? Okay, we have a question of, yes, how big the corpus has to be to have acceptable level of accuracy?
Actually, there is no limit or no specific size, but specific size. So, but as I said, if we have bigger corpora, we will have better results. But at least it should contain 100,000 sentences. At least.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Well, we have seen, well, three big topics. Well, lexicography at the beginning, then geography, so with difficult, of course, information, and then this work on the dynamic lexicon. So I'm going back to the first part about lexicography. Well, this is, of course, very interesting because here we have many issues and many questions, and one of them is, for example, if so Stelios, you showed a page of the Oxford Latin Dictionary. If we OCR that page and then we want to encode it, of course we have other issues. For example, how to structure the information. We can, of course, manually encode each information using the suggestions you propose, different possible tags. But of course, that requires a lot of time. So this is another question. So so for example, I'm working on indexes and I have the same problem. So I have OCR results and then I have to structure the information, the name, I don't know, the name of the author, the title of the word, the references, and so on. And then we can have XML output. So you have given a perfect example of the complexity of the information we are working with. And then, of course, we have different kinds of dictionaries, different genres, starting from the antiquity. And then, for example, you mentioned... Yeah, sorry, there is a question. There is a question in the chat, yes. Standard guidelines. So the question is if there is any standard guidelines about corpus representativeness.
I'm not sure what you mean by corpus representativeness.
People can talk in the Hangout. You just have to unmute yourself. So if you want to participate in the Google Hangout and not only write in the chat.
May I ask you?
Yes, please.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for perfect presentation. In corpus representativeness, I mean when, for example, when corpus contains 1 million words, it's representative of the whole population of the language, for example. And is there any number, for example, 1 million words or 100 million words, when we can stop and say that corpus is exact, for example, portrait of the real language, representativeness of the corpus. Have I explained or not normally? Is there any number of words and, for example, collocations when we can stop and say that the corpus is perfect and we can stop now? Representativeness, as far as I know, is when we can say that corpus is fine and
This type of question is a very good question for a linguist, actually. What type of corpus is representative for a language? In the case of historical languages, actually, yeah, there is also Gabby answering in the chat. In the case of historical languages, we are pretty lucky because we have actually a limited corpus. So I'm not sure about standards for the representativeness of the corpus, also because it depends on what you want to do with it. If you want to work on the lexicographical sources, on dictionaries, or anything else. But for historical languages, well, Greco-Roman sources, we are pretty lucky because the corpus is definite. And so it is limited, and I think that this might be a particular feature.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
At the same time,
yes.
we are somehow unlucky because we have only very selected pieces of languages, very selective pieces of texts that are also concentrated and we have no access whatsoever to something that we could call somehow everyday language or normal spoken language. This way is actually close to us, so we have a very biased corpus that has also strong areas and extremely weak areas. So when we model when we try to figure out what will be representative for for the whole corpus of, let's say, ancient Greek or Latin, we have to take into account that, as Gabby says, different areas, genres, styles, authors, periods are more or less better represented in our corpus. It is a quite complex model that I don't know if it is possible to give a numerical, an only numerical answer. And of course, as if you go deeper into your questions, I mean, okay, to find out how a single particle has been used, then perhaps you can say, okay, I have so many sentences or so many billion words, I can stop now. But if you go to collocations or to more complex issues, then it is more different. And the time range of the corpus is also huge. There are different parameters there that make it very, very different than a normal modern natural language corpus.
You have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, okay, thank you. You have to choose quite different components and modern language in the case of modern language. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Now it's 7:20. Unfortunately, I have to end the common session. I would go on, of course, because it was very, very interesting, but we have a limited amount of time for this common session. So, but we have the slides, and our guests are going to upload the slides on GitHub. We have your class outline, which is very rich with links and the syllabus, and also an assignment for those who are interested. So, well, thank you very much for this common session today. It was great. We have seen different kinds of work, and we have ongoing projects in Freiburg with Stelios, who is interested in lexicography, Chiara, who is working in Leipzig for geography, and then Tariq, who is helping us a lot on the computational part of this work. So, so thank you. We will meet next Wednesday, hopefully at 5 p.m. I apologize again for today. And the next week, Stelios and I will talk about quotations and text reuse. So thank you for joining us. Today we had a big audience. So thank you very much, and see you next Wednesday. And have a good night. Bye.